The coffee hadn't even cooled when Emma dropped the bomb. "Michael, I want a divorce," she said, her voice slicing through the morning quiet like a blade. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The hum of the fridge, the chirp of sparrows outside their Boise, Idaho home, all drowned out by those 5 words. Michael, 40, with hands rough from years of wrenching engines, didn't flinch. He sat across from her at their scuffed kitchen table, the one they'd snagged at a flea market back when they still shared late-night laughs and accidental touches. His hazel eyes, usually warm, flickered with something unreadable. He stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking softly against the mug, and let the silence stretch just long enough to make Emma shift in her seat. "Okay," he said finally, voice steady as if she'd asked him to grab milk from the store. "Let's do it." Emma, 38, a poised interior designer with a sleek bob and a wardrobe that screamed success, blinked. She'd rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times, maybe in front of the mirror in their guest bathroom, now cluttered with her lavender lotions and a towel rack she'd claimed as her own. She'd expected a fight, shouts, accusations, maybe even tears. But Michael just sipped his coffee, set the mug down with a gentle clink, and looked at her like she was a client canceling a contract. Her lips parted, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. She'd come armed for war, her words polished, her posture perfect in her tailored blazer. But Michael wasn't playing her game. He handed her calm instead of chaos, and it left her grasping for the script she'd memorized. "I'll have the papers sent," she said, trying to claw back control. Her voice was sharp, but there was a tremor beneath it, barely noticeable. She slid a manila envelope across the table, its edges crisp, like a dealer laying down a winning hand. Inside was her blueprint for freedom. A list of assets, accounts, and a neatly divided future. She'd spent weeks on it, calculating, planning, dreaming of a life unmoored from Michael's grease-stained jeans and predictable routines. Michael glanced at the envelope but didn't touch it. "I figured," he said, leaning back. "You're nothing if not efficient." His tone was neutral, but the words landed like a jab, too subtle for her to call it an attack. Emma's eyes narrowed, unsure if he was mocking her or admiring her. In truth, it was both. She stood, pushing her chair back a little too fast, the scrape of wood on tile jarring in the quiet kitchen. "You're calm," she said, and it wasn't a compliment. It was a challenge, a probe for the crack she expected to find. Michael shrugged, his broad shoulders lifting slightly under his faded flannel. "What's the point of yelling over something you've clearly thought through?" The air thickened. Emma opened her mouth, but no words came. She'd prepared for a beggar, a man unraveling at the seams. Instead, Michael stood, took his mug to the sink, and rinsed it under the faucet like it was any other Tuesday. The water hissed, the ceramic clinked, and Emma felt the stage she'd built for her grand exit crumbling beneath her. She grabbed her purse, heels clicking on the tiles as she headed for the door. Each step was a metronome ticking down the end of their 15-year marriage. Michael didn't watch her go. He opened the kitchen window, letting the crisp October air flood in, sharp and clean. For the first time in years, he breathed deeply, the weight of her words settling not as a wound, but as a release. Emma didn't know it yet, but Michael had suspected her betrayal for months. The late nights she blamed on client meetings, the new perfume she wore like armor, the way her phone was always face down on the counter. It all pointed to someone else. David Crow, a slick real estate developer with a penthouse and a smile that screamed money, had been her secret for nearly a year. She thought she'd hidden it well, but Michael wasn't blind. He'd seen the texts she forgot to delete, the receipts for dinners at Tino's Steakhouse, a place they'd never gone together. He hadn't confronted her, not out of weakness, but because he was biding his time. In the garage, Michael pulled a battered notebook from a shelf, its pages filled with dates, times, and details he'd quietly collected. He wasn't a detective, just a man who knew his wife better than she realized. The envelope she'd left on the table wasn't a surprise. It was the final piece of a puzzle he'd already solved. He flipped open the notebook, jotted down October 12th, 2025, divorce announced, and closed it with a soft thud. Emma thought she was leaving him behind, stepping into a glittering new life with David. She pictured Michael crumbling, stuck in their old house, drowning in regret. But as she drove away, her Lexus humming down Sunset Road, she didn't see the spark in Michael's eyes. He wasn't broken. He was awake, and he was already planning his next move. Not out of spite, but out of a quiet, burning need to reclaim the man he'd buried under years of routine. Back in the kitchen, Michael poured another coffee, the steam curling up like a signal. He didn't open her envelope. Instead, he wrote a single word on it with a Sharpie. Received. Then he stepped into the garage, where his toolbox sat, gleaming under the fluorescent light. He ran a hand over the wrench set his daughter had given him years ago, before she moved to Seattle and stopped calling. This was his anchor, his truth. Emma could have her lists and her lover. Michael had his hands, his mind, and a plan that would turn her victory into ashes. The town of Boise would soon buzz with whispers, not about Emma's triumph, but about Michael's rebirth. And when the dust settled, she'd learn what he already knew. You don't break a man like Michael Thompson. You only set him free. The garage smelled of motor oil and cedar, a sanctuary where Michael could think. He stood over his workbench, the fluorescent light buzzing faintly, casting shadows on the battered notebook in his hands. Last night's entry, October 12th, 2025, divorce announced, stared back at him, a milestone he hadn't wanted but now embraced. Emma thought she'd blindsided him, but Michael had been piecing together her betrayal for months, each clue a shard in a mosaic of deceit. It started with a receipt, crumpled in her purse, for a $200 dinner at Tino's Steakhouse, dated a night she'd claimed to be at a client's mood board session. Then came the texts, glimpsed on her phone before she flipped it face down. Can't wait to see you, D. Michael wasn't the type to snoop, but doubt has a way of sharpening instincts. By summer, he'd started noting patterns. Her late nights, her new habit of locking her laptop, the perfume that clung to her like a stranger's signature. David Crow, a real estate mogul with a penthouse and a reputation for charm, was the shadow behind it all. Michael didn't rage or confront her. Anger was a tool, not a master. Instead, he hunted quietly, methodically, like a man tracking game in the Idaho hills. He borrowed a friend's old laptop, set up a private email, and began digging. Bank statements showed transfers to an account Emma hadn't mentioned. Small at first, then bolder, siphoning their joint savings to a nest egg labeled consulting fees. A quick search on X revealed David's name tied to her latest project, a luxury condo remodel. Photos from a Boise networking event showed them laughing too close, her hand on his arm, his smile too familiar. Tonight, with Emma gone to her book club, another lie, Michael sat at the kitchen table, the manila envelope still unopened. He didn't need her list to know what she wanted. The house, half the savings, a clean exit to her new life. But he wasn't here to play her game. He opened his notebook, flipping past pages of dates and details, and dialed a number he'd saved weeks ago. Elena Torres, came the crisp voice on the other end. Elena, a Boise lawyer with a shark's reputation and a soft spot for underdogs, had been recommended by a buddy at the auto shop. Michael didn't waste words. My wife wants a divorce. She's been cheating, hiding money. I've got proof. Proof is good, Elena said, her tone sharpening. Send me what you have. If it's solid, we can make her regret playing dirty. Michael emailed the files, screenshots, receipts, bank records, each one a nail in Emma's carefully curated facade. Elena's reply came within an hour. This is gold. Meet me tomorrow. We're not just fighting for a fair split. We're taking back what's yours. Michael leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. He wasn't after revenge, not in the petty sense. He wanted justice, the kind that would sting Emma's pride more than her wallet. She'd always seen him as predictable, a mechanic who'd never outsmart her. That was her first mistake. The next morning, Boise woke to a crisp October dawn, the kind that made the Snake River sparkle. Michael drove downtown, his old pickup rattling past coffee shops and boutiques where Emma's clients sipped lattes and praised her visionary designs. Elena's office was a no-nonsense space, all glass and steel, with a view of the foothills. She slid a folder across her desk, her dark eyes gleaming. "Your wife's been sloppy," she said. "The account she's funneling money to is tied to David Crow's company. We can prove she's hiding assets. If we play this right, she'll lose more than half." Michael nodded, his jaw tight. "I don't want a war. I just want what's fair." Elena smirked. "Fair's my specialty. But fair doesn't mean soft. She's betting you'll roll over. Let's show her you won't." Back home, Michael moved with purpose. He packed a duffel with essentials. His wrench set, a flannel that still smelled of cedar, a photo of his daughter from before she drifted away. The house, once their shared dream, felt like a museum of someone else's life. Emma's minimalist decor, white walls, fake ferns, live, laugh, love plaques, had erased every trace of him. He didn't belong here anymore. By noon, he'd found a new place, a small cottage near the Bronco River, rented through a friend of a friend. No Zillow, no fuss, just a handshake and a key. The cedar walls and creaky porch felt like a promise, a blank slate where he could rebuild. He moved his tools first, setting up a workbench in the garage. The rest could wait. Emma, meanwhile, was basking in her victory. At a wine bar downtown, she swirled a glass of Chardonnay, regaling her book club with the story of Michael's surrender. "He didn't even argue," she said, her laugh a little too loud. "Just nodded, like I'd asked him to mow the lawn." Her friends, polished women in their 30s, all highlights and yoga schedules, gasped and giggled. "You broke him," said Tara, a divorcee with a penchant for drama. Emma smiled, but her eyes didn't. She'd won, hadn't she? Except the whispers were already starting. At the co-op, a cashier glanced at her, then whispered to a coworker. At the post office, a neighbor mentioned Michael's new look, gym sessions, a sharp jacket from Turner's. "He seems lighter," she said, her pitying smile cutting deeper than Emma expected. Boise was small, and secrets didn't stay buried long. That night, alone in their half-empty house, Emma scrolled through X. A post on the community board caught her eye. A blurry photo of Michael at a coffee shop, laughing with a woman, tall, confident, with a leather jacket and a no-nonsense ponytail. The caption read, "Spotted. Mike Thompson looking happier than ever." Comments piled up. "Good for him. Who's the mystery woman?" Emma's thumb froze. The woman was Kate, a helicopter pilot who'd rolled into town a year ago, all sharp wit and zero pretense. Emma didn't know her, but she knew of her, and she didn't like what she saw. Michael wasn't crumbling. He was rising, and Emma, for the first time, felt the ground shift beneath her perfectly planned exit. She closed the app, her reflection in the phone screen sharp and unfamiliar. She told herself it didn't matter, but the knot in her stomach said otherwise. Michael wasn't just moving on, he was rewriting the story, and she wasn't the hero anymore. Michael's boots crunched on the gravel path to his new cottage, the Bronco River murmuring nearby like an old friend. The October sun hung low, painting the Idaho sky in hues of amber and bruise purple, but it was the spark in his chest that felt like dawn. He wasn't the man Emma had left behind. Not anymore. The cottage was modest, cedar walls and a sagging porch, but it was his. No trace of her sterile decor, no echoes of arguments over unpaid bills or unspoken resentments. He'd spent the first night unpacking his tools, arranging them on a workbench like a painter laying out brushes. The wrench set, a gift from his daughter years ago, gleamed under the garage light. It was more than metal. It was a reminder of who he was before he let routine bury him. Emma's betrayal hadn't broken him. It had cracked open a door. At 40, Michael was done sleepwalking. He joined a gym downtown, not for vanity but for clarity. The burn of weights, the rhythm of his breath, stripped away years of stagnation. He traded faded flannels for a tailored jacket from Turner's, a store he'd once mocked as a wallet trap. The mirror showed a man leaner, sharper, with eyes that held a quiet fire. Boise noticed. At the co-op, a barista did a double take. At the auto shop, his buddy clapped his shoulder. "Damn, Mike, you look 10 years younger." He wasn't chasing youth. He was claiming his life. The cottage became his canvas. He hung a framed map of the Rockies, places he'd sworn to hike when he was still young enough to dream. A shelf held dog-eared Louis L'Amour novels and a birding guide he'd bought on a whim. The only photo was of his daughter, grinning at 12, before college and distance pulled her away. Emma's shadow didn't belong here, and Michael made sure of it. Across town, Emma was spinning her narrative. At a sleek wine bar, fairy lights twinkling above, she leaned into her book club's gasps. "He just sat there," she said, twirling her glass. "Didn't even fight it. I mean, Michael? He's not built for war." Her friends, Botoxed, Pilates-toned, dripping in curated confidence, laughed. Tara, the group's resident cynic, raised her glass. "You freed him, Em. Poor guy's probably crying into his toolbox." Emma's smile was perfect, but her grip on the stem tightened. She'd won, hadn't she? The cracks were showing. At a client meeting, a realtor mentioned Michael's new look, her tone too casual. "Saw him at Turner's. He's different." Emma brushed it off, but the seed lodged deep. On X, the Boise Community Board was alive with chatter. A post showed Michael at a riverside cafe, coffee in hand, laughing with Kate, the pilot with the leather jacket and a laugh that turned heads. Comments piled up. "Mike's killing it. Is that Kate R? She's badass." Emma scrolled, her thumb trembling. Kate wasn't like her friends, all polish and pretense. She was real, grounded, the kind of woman who didn't need to perform. And Michael was leaning into her orbit. Emma's affair with David Crow was her escape, a glittering promise of penthouses and power. David, with his tailored suits and easy charm, made her feel seen, not like Michael's steady but predictable gaze. But David's texts were shorter now, his excuses sharper. "Work's insane," he'd say, canceling another dinner. Emma told herself it was temporary. She was still in control until she wasn't. Michael, meanwhile, was building momentum. He met Elena Torres again, this time at a diner where the coffee was strong and the booths were worn. She slid a folder across the table. "Your wife's account is a gold mine," Elena said, her voice low. "She's funneled $40,000 to David's company, disguised as consulting. We can prove it's marital assets. She's betting you won't fight." Michael's jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed calm. "I'm not fighting for money. I'm fighting for me." Elena grinned. "Good, because when we're done, she'll wish she'd played fair." They mapped out the strategy. Document everything, freeze the accounts, let Emma think she's winning until the courtroom. Michael didn't want her humiliated, just exposed. Her pride was her Achilles heel, and he'd let her own choices cut her down. Back at the cottage, Michael's life was taking shape. Kate dropped by one evening, her motorcycle rumbling in the driveway. She carried a six-pack and a story about a rescue mission in the Tetons, her voice low and warm. They sat on the porch, the river glinting under the stars, and talked, really talked, for hours. Kate didn't ask about Emma, didn't need to. Her presence was a balm, not a bandage. When she left, her hand brushed his arm, a fleeting touch that lingered longer than it should have. Boise's rumor mill churned. At the florist, a neighbor whispered to Emma about Michael's gym routine. At church, a friend mentioned his new place by the river. "He seems happy," she said, her pity stinging like a slap. Emma laughed it off, but her stomach twisted. She checked X again, obsessively now. A new post. Michael fixing a kid's bike at a community event. Kate handing him tools, both grinning like they'd known each other forever. The caption read, "Boise's favorite mechanic is back." Likes flooded in. Emma's chest burned, not with love, but with something uglier. Possession. She'd left him, but he wasn't supposed to thrive. One night, alone in her hotel suite, David's gift, while she transitioned, Emma poured a third glass of Merlot. The house was under contract, her victory lap almost complete. But the mirror showed a woman fraying at the edges, her perfect bob limp, her eyes hollow. She texted David, "We need to talk," expecting his usual charm. His reply was curt, "Busy. Tomorrow." She stared at the screen, the knot in her gut tightening. For the first time, she wondered if she'd miscalculated, not just Michael, but everything. Michael, meanwhile, stood on his porch, coffee in hand, the river's hum steadying him. He wasn't the man who'd begged Emma to stay years ago, when her distance first grew. He was someone new, forged in betrayal but not defined by it. Elena's folder sat on his table, proof of Emma's lies ready to unravel her. Kate's laugh still echoed in his mind, a promise of something real. Boise was watching, and Michael was no longer the quiet mechanic in the background. He was the man rewriting his story one deliberate step at a time. And Emma? She was about to learn how it felt to lose control. The Boise courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, its high windows catching the gray light of a November morning. Emma sat ramrod straight, her tailored blazer pristine, her face a mask of practiced calm. She'd planned this day like a design project, every detail measured, every outcome assured. But across the aisle, Michael's steady gaze, unyielding as the river he now called home, told her she'd miscalculated. The divorce hearing wasn't supposed to be a battle. Emma had envisioned a quick signature, a clean split. She'd keep the house sale profits, half the savings, and her reputation as Boise's golden designer. David Crow, waiting in his penthouse, was her future. A life of gala invites and private jets. But Michael, in a crisp jacket that fit like a second skin, wasn't the defeated mechanic she'd expected. He sat beside Elena Torres, whose sharp smile promised trouble. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with steel-gray hair, flipped through the papers. "Let's address the asset division," she said, voice clipped. Emma's lawyer, a slick hire from David's circle, stood. "My client seeks an equitable split, Your Honor. The proposed division is fair, reflecting 15 years of marriage." He gestured to Emma's manila envelope, now dog-eared from handling, its list of accounts and properties her ticket out. Elena rose, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "Your Honor, we contest the fairness of this division. Mrs. Thompson has misrepresented marital assets." A murmur rippled through the sparse gallery. Friends, neighbors, a few curious locals. Emma's jaw tightened. She'd been meticulous, hadn't she? The consulting account, the transfers to David's company, all buried in paperwork no mechanic would unravel. Elena slid a folder to the judge. "We have evidence of hidden accounts, totaling $40,000, siphoned from joint savings under the guise of business expenses. These funds were transferred to a company owned by David Crow, Mrs. Thompson's associate." The word landed like a stone. Emma's lawyer objected, but the judge silenced him with a glance. "Continue, Ms. Torres." Michael didn't look at Emma. His hands rested on the table, steady. The same hands that had rebuilt engines and now dismantled her lies. Elena presented screenshots, texts, bank records, a photo of Emma and David at Tino's, her hand on his, their smiles too intimate for business. The gallery whispered. Emma's cheeks burned, not from shame but from the spotlight she hadn't scripted. "Your Honor," Elena said, "Mrs. Thompson's actions constitute financial misconduct. We request a revised division, awarding Mr. Thompson the full house proceeds and the contested savings, plus legal fees. The judge's pen scratched notes, her expression unreadable. Emma's lawyer stammered, "This is speculative, unsubstantiated." But the evidence was a noose, tightening with every page. Emma's mind raced. How had Michael found it? She'd locked her laptop, deleted texts, covered every track. But she'd underestimated him, assumed his world ended at oil changes and socket wrenches. She glanced at him, searching for triumph, but his face was blank. A man watching a storm he'd predicted. That calm was worse than anger. It stripped her of power. The judge spoke. "Mrs. Thompson, these documents suggest deliberate concealment. Unless you can refute this evidence, I'm inclined to favor Mr. Thompson's claim." Emma's lawyer fumbled, promising counter-documents, but the damage was done. The gallery's whispers grew. Boise's elite, her clients among them, now saw her not as a visionary but as a cheat. Outside, the verdict hit like a winter gust. Michael got the house proceeds, the savings, and a clean exit. Emma kept her business but lost her leverage. Worse, the story leaked, not to the press, but to Boise's gossip vine. By evening, X was ablaze. Designer caught hiding cash in divorce. Clients canceled meetings. David texted, "We need space." His cowardice as predictable as his charm. Emma's empire, built on perception, crumbled in hours. She sat in her rented condo, the city's lights mocking her through floor-to-ceiling windows. Her phone buzzed friends or former friends, fishing for gossip. She ignored them, pouring a glass of Merlot she didn't drink. The mirror showed a stranger. Perfect makeup, hollow eyes. She'd left Michael to soar, but he'd clipped her wings with her own lies. Michael, meanwhile, drove to his cottage, the Bronco River glinting under a crescent moon. Kate was there, leaning against her motorcycle, a thermos of coffee in hand. "Heard you won," she said, her grin easy. Michael shrugged. "Didn't win, just got what's mine." They sat on the porch, the night air sharp, her presence a quiet anchor. She didn't ask about the trial, just told a story about a stormy flight over the sawtooths, her laugh pulling him back to the present. Boise's rumors now crowned Michael. At the co-op, a cashier called him the comeback king. At a community event, he fixed a kid's skateboard, Kate tossing him tools, their banter drawing smiles. Posts multiplied. Michael at the river, rod in hand. Michael and Kate at a diner, heads close over pie. The captions were kind. Boise's best mechanic, living his best life. Emma saw them all, each one a needle. She'd wanted freedom, but Michael had found it first. One night, Emma drove past the cottage, uninvited, her Lexus idling on the gravel road. The porch light glowed, laughter spilling from inside. Michael's, Kate's, maybe others. She didn't knock. The gate, new and matte black, said enough. This was his world now, and she wasn't welcome. She turned around, the river's hum fading, her reflection in the windshield a ghost of the woman she'd been. Michael didn't gloat. He hung a new photo in the cottage, him and his daughter, reunited after a hesitant call. The wrench set stayed on his bench, a talisman of his strength. Elena's words echoed, "She'll wish she'd played fair." But Michael didn't need Emma's regret. He had the river, the stars, and a life he'd rebuilt from the ground up. Emma's fall wasn't his victory, it was her consequence. And he was already looking forward. The Bronco River shimmered under a December sunrise, its surface catching the first light like a promise. Michael stood on his cottage porch, coffee mug warm in his hands, the steam curling upward as if carrying away the last traces of a life he'd outgrown. Boise slept, but he was wide awake, alive in a way he hadn't been in years. The divorce was final, the ink dry on papers that gave him the house proceeds, the savings, and something far more valuable: freedom. Emma's betrayal, once a blade in his chest, had become a catalyst. At 40, Michael wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. The cottage, with its cedar walls and creaky floors, was more than a home. It was a declaration. He'd hung a second photo beside his daughter's, a grainy shot of him at 20, grinning beside a rebuilt Chevy, his father's arm around him. It reminded him who he'd been before Emma's world swallowed his own. His days had rhythm now. Mornings at the gym where sweat and steel sharpened his focus. Afternoons at the auto shop, where clients called him Mike the Miracle for saving engines others had given up on. Evenings by the river, rod in hand, or on the porch with Kate, whose stories of chopper flights and mountain rescues lit up the dusk. Their friendship, steady and unforced, was a bridge to something new. Not a romance, not yet, but a connection that felt like home. Boise's whispers had shifted. At the co-op, a cashier slipped him an extra coffee, winking, "For our favorite comeback story." At a community fair, he taught kids to change a tire, Kate tossing him rags with a grin that drew eyes. X buzzed with his quiet assent. A photo of him fixing a school bus, captioned, "Mike Thompson, Boise's hero." Another of him and Kate by the river, her arm slung over his shoulder, both squinting into the sun. "New beginnings look good on you," read the comments. Michael didn't seek the spotlight, but it found him and he didn't shy away. Emma, meanwhile, was a fading star. Her condo, once a symbol of triumph, felt like a cage. The view of Boise's skyline mocked her, each twinkling light a reminder of the life she'd gambled and lost. Her business, once the talk of the town, was hemorrhaging clients. The ex-post about her hidden accounts had spread like wildfire. Not to the press, but to the elite she'd courted. Invites to galas dried up. Her phone, once alive with notifications, was silent. David Crow, predictably, had vanished. His last text a cold, "This isn't working." She'd built her empire on perception, and now perception had turned. One night, Emma sat at her glass dining table, a bottle of Merlot half empty, her laptop open to X. She scrolled past Michael's latest post. A candid shot of him and Kate at a diner, laughing over pie, the kind of joy she'd never given him. The caption read, "Life starts when you let go of what's gone." Comments poured in, "You're an inspiration, Mike." "Kate's a keeper." Emma's chest tightened, not with regret but with the bitter sting of irrelevance. She'd been the standard, the woman others envied. Now she was a cautionary tale. She typed a message, fingers trembling. "Michael, we need to talk." She hit send, expecting a pause, a crack in his armor. His reply was instant. "About what?" 2 words, clinical, like a doctor dismissing a patient. She tried again. "There's things left unsaid." But minutes passed with no response. Then, a final text. "I said what I needed when I left. Didn't you?" It wasn't cruel, just final, a door locked from the inside. Emma stared at the screen, her reflection ghostly in the glass. She'd held the reins for years, but Michael wasn't playing her game anymore. He wasn't playing at all. The next day, she drove to the cottage, unannounced, her Lexus creeping up the gravel path. The matte black gate loomed, a silent sentinel. She pressed the intercom, heart pounding. "It's me," she said, voice thin. A pause, then a click. The gate swung open, not welcoming but allowing. The porch light glowed, warm against the winter chill. Inside, Kate was setting the table, barefoot, a sweater loose on her frame. Michael stood at the stove, stirring something that smelled of rosemary and comfort. They turned, Kate's smile fading, Michael's eyes steady but distant. "Didn't know you were coming," he said, wiping his hands on a towel. No anger, just fact. Kate stepped back, sipping her coffee, her presence a quiet claim. Emma clutched her purse, her heels absurd on the hardwood. "I thought we could talk," she said, but the words felt hollow. Michael tilted his head. "Talk's done, Emma. You made your choice." Kate lit a candle, the flame casting gold over a table set for two. Emma was the odd piece, a puzzle that didn't fit. She tried one last time. Did I ever mean anything? Her voice cracked, raw, a stranger's plea. Michael set his mug down, his gaze clear. You did, until you decided I didn't. The truth landed softly, unassailable. Kate glanced away, giving them space but not leaving. Emma nodded to him or herself and turned. Her heels clicked out, each step a period in a story she no longer starred in. The door closed, the river's hum swallowing her exit. Michael didn't watch her go. He poured Kate another coffee, her laugh pulling him back to the moment. Outside, Emma sat in her car, hands at 10 and 2, the gate shutting behind her. The cottage faded in her rear view, and with it, the man she'd underestimated. She'd left him to win, but he'd rewritten the rules. Back in her condo, Emma packed her designs, her dreams, her pride. She'd move, Portland, maybe somewhere to start over. But the mirror held no lies. She'd lost more than money or status. She'd lost herself. Michael, though, had found his truth. He stood by the river the next morning, Kate beside him, their mugs steaming in the cold. His daughter had called last night, promising a visit. The wrench set gleamed in his garage, a symbol of what he'd built and what he'd never lose again. Emma's fall was her own. Michael's rise was his. And as the sun climbed, he knew one thing for certain. The best revenge was a life well lived.